Well, for more, let's cross to Colombo. Human rights attorney Bhavani Fonseca joins us. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you.
Before I ask you about the latest developments, what in your view, what has sparked this crisis?
Well, the crisis was there for several months. Earlier this year, we had local government elections where we saw the coalition government taking very different positions and attacking the president, actually attacking his own coalition partner. And since then, it's been a very a tense coalition. The last couple of weeks, we saw even a no confidence motion being tabled against the Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe, which he successfully defeated. But you could see the tension and the divisions within the coalition for several months. So everyone was aware this was a difficult relationship. But the surprising aspect was the suddenness of what happened on Friday. And of course, the constitutionality of what happened and the legitimacy of what happened. But the fact that there were problems brewing was not a surprise.
What do you make of the Attorney General refusing to sign on to this change in prime ministers?
Well, one has to look at what happened since Friday. The president suddenly took this action. There was no inkling whatsoever this was going to happen. On Saturday, Parliament was prorogued. The president has the power to prorogue Parliament, but there are questions in terms of what the president did on Friday, the legality, the constitutionality of it. The Speaker has since written to the President, and from media reports, we understand the Speaker actually also met with the President today, raising issues of what happened on Friday and urging the President to reconvene Parliament. So the Attorney General's letter basically goes to the heart of this issue in terms of whether this issue can be solved in Parliament and whether the Speaker has the power to reconvene Parliament. And on that, there is precedent. In 2003, the then Speaker gave an order very clearly stating parliamentary supremacy is there. The Speaker can reconvene. So the Attorney General's letter in that sense is moot when the Speaker has decided, has written to the President. The leader of the opposition and several leaders, political party leaders, have also written urging the reconvening of Parliament. And I think that's essential for democracy because the Constitution is very clear. It should be in Parliament that this matter is resolved. It's not an executive decision, it's a parliamentary decision.
And are
So
you
we are in
heartened,
limbo
Bhavani
in that
Fonseca?
Parliament has been
Bhavani
prorogued
Fonseca, are
before
you
Parliament
heartened
could
by the
decide
fact
on a
that
matter that's with them.
are you
And
heartened
that
by the fact that the Speaker of Parliament and the President are talking?
I think conversations are very important. Engagement is very important. So the talking is good, but will the talking lead to action is the question. I think it's important that the speaker spoke to the president. He wrote to the president, and he's written out twice. And I think that's important to keep the communication going. But the fact that Parliament was prorogued is disturbing. And in the first letter, the Speaker himself raises this issue that the Speaker should have been kept informed of such a decision. So while there's conversation, there's also concern where those conversations will lead. And it's very important, I think, end of the day, despite all the conversations that are happening, we actually see action towards democracy being upheld. And for that, Parliament should be reconvened.
Bhavani Fonseca, you're a human rights attorney. Speaking of conversations, many advocates say that there isn't enough of a conversation when it comes to the end of that brutal civil war that happened with the crushing of the Tamil Tiger rebels in 2009. Timid efforts, they say, when it comes to actually having reconciliation and full light shown on that period. The return of Mahinda Rajapaksa to the prime ministership, what would it mean for Sri Lanka?
Well, one has to look at what was there during Mahinda Rajapaksa's presidency before. His government saw a very brutal end to a nearly 3-decade ethnic war. But post-war, when there was hope for reconciliation, we also saw continued conflict and ethno-religious conflict as well. So the signs are that the reign of terror we saw during the Rajapaksa period will return. The safeguards, the checks and balances may be dispensed with. In 2015, when the present president and the government was brought in, they brought in very important constitutional amendments to safeguard and have checks and balances on key institutions. There is a fear that we may actually go back on some of these key developments. But one recognition is, despite promises of this government initiating independent investigations, prosecuting alleged perpetrators, we have seen very limited progress. So the fear is that the impunity hasn't been addressed. And if you have a president and those who saw some terror, saw attacks against media, critiques, civil society, during that period, that reign of terror will return. Now, this is assuming we see similar patterns as before. This is all speculation. But the way the transfer of power happened, unconstitutional transfer of power happened on Friday, raises many questions that the Constitution in itself will be undermined by those who are now claiming to be in office. So the early signs are not very good.
Human rights attorney Bhavani Fonseca, many thanks for joining us from Colombo.